to another episode of We Are Not Wizards. My name's Richard. I'll be your host for 2018 or 2017 or maybe 2019, but we don't know. But after all, it is your podcast. Why have we jumped to years? Because joining me today is a guest who's writing or has written a book, collaborating with other people, which happens to take the world of pressed and printed trees and put it all together in a book which is also pressed and printed trees. It's been kicking around on Kickstarter. This is what we would call a quick start on the Kickstart. The game is the Boardgame Book. The gentleman that's putting it together is Owen Duffy. So hello, Owen.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm very, very good. It's good to kind of speak, because we've been kind of sharing emails back and forward for a couple of weeks, trying to get something organised. So this is.
We've been trying to make this happen, but you've been moving houses and things, haven't you?
Yes. You've been dealing with books. I've been dealing with boxes. So it's one or the other. At present, the campaign's got just under about 2 weeks to go, and you're funded.
Yeah, we're fully funded. We hit our target yesterday, which is fantastic. And now it's just a case of trying to get as many people interested as possible, because the more we make from here, then the bigger the print run we can do, the more we can promote the book.
Yeah.
So yeah, delighted and just keen to keep that momentum going.
Cool. Okay. Now, for people that haven't listened to us for the first time, the reason that we do this is quite simply because we don't think there is enough podcasts out there about board games. There's only a couple of us in Scotland, actually. There's ourselves, there's the Unlucky Frog Gaming, and there's also the Giant Brain, who are also known as Brainwaves. And the other reason that we do this is because we like to speak to people who are in the middle of running their campaigns to find out a little bit about themselves as well as the campaign that they're running at the moment. So we're very, very pleased to have Owen come on and join us. So one of the things we like to do is we like to find out a little bit of a history.
Sure.
About yourself. So we like to have a little bit of a look at the foreword of the past before we look at the main body of the present, and we look at the epilogue of the future. So, how'd you get involved? How'd you get into the hobby first of all, and then jump into kind of actually starting to kind of write about it? I mean, where did you first kind of cut your cardboard teeth?
Yeah, well, this is going way back. I mean, like most people, I played, Mousetrap and Connect 4 when I was a little kid. But really, you can look at when I got into the hobby back to when I was in primary school.
Oh, right.
And somebody gave me a little Warhammer Goblin, one of the lead ones back in the days before giving pointy lead things to children was banned.
Did it taste nice?
Well, no, it's better than that. I shoved it in my back pocket and sat on it. So yeah, fortunately it didn't need a tetanus injection or anything, but that was memorable. So that was my introduction to the hobby, was getting jabbed in the backside by a tiny goblin, and from there I got into the whole Games Workshop thing, which seems a bit odd given the circumstances.
Yeah.
And played Warhammer, played 40k, Blood Bowl, and from there I kind of discovered the world of RPGs, and because I was a bit of a kind of rock kid, I kind of gravitated to World of Darkness. So I played a lot of Vampire the Masquerade, probably an age where I was too young for it.
Yeah, I've heard it's a bit. It gets a bit.
It's a bit violent and it's a bit sexy, and and it's everything that a 13-year-old kid just wants, And yeah, so I got the books confiscated by my school. That was an interesting conversation that they had with my parents about. Are you aware of what Owen's reading? Did
they actually get you in the school? Did they actually get the parents in?
They did. Yeah.
Was the book a bit more well thumbed? But you found out the teacher had put like post-it notes and stuff like that.
Oh yeah. For some reason they'd left it in the photocopier, I don't know. But so got into RPGs, played those for a couple of years, and then really I kind of fell out of the hobby a little bit.
Yeah.
I got back into it when my wife and I were expecting a wee baby. Mm-hmm. And we realised we are going to have no capacity to go out and socialise for the next 2 years.
Just
so we
two.
thought we were naive at the time. The full extent of it has dawned on us since. Yeah. So we thought, well, we'd both been into games in the past, so we thought, let's see what's going on. We got a wee collection with, all the gateway stuff, Carcassonne, Ticket to Ride, that kind of thing. And the idea was we'd get our friends round to come round to our place if we couldn't go out to the pub anymore. And then, the other kind of side of this, how I got into the writing side, is that I've worked in media for a good few years now. Started out at Radio Scotland doing, if anyone knows the Fred Macaulay show.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, I used to research and write for that, which was fun.
All right, okay.
And,
so you're writing comedy stuff then?
Well, it was, so Fred's show was sort of a kind of humorous, topical kind of magazine thing. So, it was, some funny stuff, some factual stuff, good mix. But and then from there I moved on to The Guardian, doing kind of behind the scenes stuff there, and the opportunity came up when they first started looking quite seriously at doing video games coverage. Yeah. I said to them, well, look, there's some really interesting stuff going on here in the tabletop space, some really interesting designers, and it's getting so much bigger and more popular. And they went for it. They gave me a chance to do it. They got me in. They got Quentin Smith from Shut Up and Sit Down to do some stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just continued from there, which has been great. And that's led to opportunities to write elsewhere, and now finally to kind of collaborate with some of my favourite gaming writers and to do this book.
Okay. So have you always been a little bit of a creative soul then? I mean, it's obviously, it sounds like you've gone from obviously the Warhammer days into RPGs. So were you a bit of a DM as well yourself then?
Yeah,
were you working on kind of scenarios and stuff?
Yeah, I would run games more than I played characters, and I almost always came up with my own scenarios rather than running pre-gens, because just a big part of the appeal was sort of kind of creating these fictional settings and coming up with these characters, and just kind of throwing them out there and seeing what the players did, how they reacted, where things went. So yeah, the creative side was something that really drew me into it. And I mean, I think going back to Warhammer and 40k, I mean, all of the influences there are all kind of, sci-fi, horror, skulls, death, horrible aliens, and that's all stuff that I got right into. So yeah, that kind of informed my interest in other kinds of media, really. It kind of led me into appreciating heavy metal and sci-fi and kind of horror films and literature. So yeah, that whole kind of creative connection to gaming is something that's always spoken to me.
And of course was it kind of cool when you were kind of like working at The Guardian to be so involved in kind of like the hobby, where you kind of like, I mean, because one of the things you see about kind of like the video game writing is video game writing's never really, really well paid. And a lot of the video game writing stuff seems to rely on people kind of getting kind of like review copies and things like that to kind of keep them happy. So was it kind of, were you like, oh cool, I'm kind of actually getting sat here, I'm getting paid here to kind of draft stuff up, write stuff up and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously interesting to work in an area that you're interested in anyway. I mean, I was doing kind of some kind of straight news reporting and stuff as well, which that also is kind of interesting and challenging in all sorts of ways. But just kind of being able to write about the hobby, and particularly being able to introduce it to an audience that perhaps wasn't that familiar with it, was really good. Because obviously, folks like us, we kind of check people's YouTube channels and podcasts, and we're on Board Game Geek and all of that kind of thing. But I mean, there's a lot of people reading, a site like The Guardian who aren't dyed-in-the-wool gamers, who don't know that there's this kind of creative explosion that's been going on for years in the hobby. Yeah. So just being able to bring people into that feels pretty good.
So when you see some of the other publications kind of trying it and saying, board games, they're now really big, aren't they? And then they've got a picture, a stock photograph of folks kind of showing Monopoly, and you still see that. And
I know, and I think there's such pressure in a lot of places on people to just kind of churn stuff out. There's places that want their journalists to turn out multiple pieces per day, and they're putting people onto subjects in which they don't have any expertise, and that leads to those kind of listicle. I mean, like I've seen it in places like Cosmo did something, and the Telegraph did a really weird piece a couple of years ago about how why board games are dying, which was news to me.
Yeah, I remember actually seeing that. I remember seeing it in multiple places, because I think it was copied over about 7 or 8 kind of various kind of Facebook groups and forums and things like that. Just
Ruffled a few feathers there.
Everybody kind of like shakes head. He's just going like, oh, okay, where you kind of getting this? Did you kind of feel that you were kind of more evangelizing to people, kind of like, well, maybe this is something you should try. This is an actual very kind of vibrant and kind of live hobby.
Yeah, definitely that was part of it. And I mean, because there is so much interesting kind of innovative stuff coming out, it does mean that there's plenty of good stuff to point people towards, and I mean, for me, there is that desire to promote the hobby and to put it out there and to bring more people into this community. But by the same token, games criticism is no good if you're just focusing on the positive. So it's kind of important to me to, even in a mostly positive review, to kind of point out, are there some rough edges? Are there kind of places where a game might appeal more to one sort of player than to another? So yes, it's important to me to bring new people into the hobby, but also to give a sort of balanced view of it that can kind of inform people's choices.
Do you think we're kind of in danger of going down the video game route and getting the kind of the 7 out of 10 thing, where it seems that seems to be a standard mark if people aren't sure whether to say a game's good or a game's kind of bad?
Yeah, well, I've always tried to avoid any situation where I have to put a kind of arbitrary score on a review.
Yeah.
Because to me, it's just there's no accurate way to there's no objective scale that all games can be judged against. They're all trying to create different experiences and different feelings and appeal to different people. But I mean, I do think there can be a tendency towards both positivity and negativity. I mean, it seems to me in video games more, you have people who go the sort of safe 7 out of 10 route.
Yeah.
You have people who go the other way and are really snarky about everything. I mean, there's people who I've seen reviewing video games who, if you look at what they're actually saying, they're actually pretty positive about a game, but it's delivered in such a way that it just comes across as they hate it and they're jaded and they're cynical.
Yeah. Well, I was talking about this in relation to the industry still kind of finding its feet and still how you can critique things, which is interesting that you spent some time with Quinn's, because they've managed to kind of reach that happy balance where they're able to say this game's really, really good, but also at the same time this box just completely befuddles me as to why it's kind of this way. They kind of mix the kind of the rough with the smooth. Yeah, I must admit, I'm still kind of, I don't understand review scores on board games, because if I'm looking at my kind of my boxed up collection kind of behind me, I mean, I've got Isle of Skye there, which is fantastic, and I would, if I was scoring it, I would give it a 9. But I've got Dead of Winter there as well, and if I was scoring that, I'd give it a 9. But I've also got, I've got Escape from Colditz Castle. I would probably score it a 9. But the thing is, I could put those 3 different games in front of 3 different people, and they would all walk away and say, actually, guess what? Kind of hidden traitor mechanics are not my bag. I don't like resource management. I don't like that kind of thing, which is kind of interesting. Do you? I mean, what do you prefer? Do you prefer when you've been writing about the hobby? Do you prefer writing about the hobby as a whole, or do you prefer kind of doing the review stuff? I mean, what would you prefer to do?
Yeah, well, because I write for a couple of different places, I get to do some quite different stuff. I mean, for Tabletop Gaming magazine, for example, I do a monthly feature piece where I interview the designers of kind of interesting or noteworthy or influential games. And some of that stuff has just been really fascinating to me. I mean, you kind of dig into the stories behind these games, and you get such an impression of the sort of character of the designers and the kind of ideas that they're trying to express, and what some of the influences on them have been, not just in terms of kind of mechanical design of games, but kind of their life experiences and the type of media that they, the type of films or music that's fed into their designs. So that to me is some of the most interesting stuff that I do. And then the reviews, I mean, something that I write for Tabletop Gaming is going to be very different to something that I write for The Guardian, because you have a more kind of informed kind of gaming audience in one of those outlets.
Yeah.
Whereas like with The Guardian, I can't even use some of the sort of jargon and shorthand that is commonplace to folks like us. You know, if I say like worker placement
It's a
or
worker
hand
placement
management,
game, and then just like that means you're putting things meeples.
Is it
down.
a job centre?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
Is it like,
Meeples. Meeples are little wooden kind of counters that you put on spaces. Spaces are places where you can go on down the rabbit hole forever.
Yeah. And I mean, something that I try to do kind of wherever I'm writing is try not to lean too heavily on the mechanical descriptions. Because to me, the kind of experience of a game, the way that you feel when you're playing it, the sort of interactions that you have with your friends, that's the more interesting part. That's the bit that kind of draws me to the table and makes me curious whenever I get a new game and I want to try it out.
Do you think the kind of the spaces evolving that we should try and move away from these kind of general views like a worker placement? And it has obviously it has its place as a general thing, but do you think it's too easy to kind of people are looking for labels in order to quantify making kind of like a buying decision, and sometimes they can miss an entire fantastic game just because it's got a label, say like worker placement?
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying. Like, one thing that a discussion I had with someone recently was the term "dudes on a map."
Yes.
Well, what does that mean? It means there's dudes and they're on a map, but what does it tell you beyond that? You know?
Yeah, I mean, to me, Cry Havoc is dudes on a map.
Yeah.
Hero Quest is kind of dudes in a dungeon place. It's kind of where do you start? How do you define that? How do you say exactly what you're talking about? I mean, I know what you mean. You're probably talking things like Rising Sun and things like that, But is it then going into things like, Conan the Barbarian? Are we talking about potentially Yamatai? Are we talking about Bunny Kingdom? Are we talking area control type of thing? But I mean, I guess, is that something that you're conscious about when you're writing and reviewing games, especially if it's maybe something that's kind of crossing between two different genres?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure, if people look up the stuff that I've written, they'll find plenty of times that I've failed and I've slipped into some of this terminology. But, to me, that sort of mechanical description, I mean, this kind of shorthand that we have as gamers kind of has its place, because, if I'm posting on a forum post on Board Game Geek, then everyone who's reading that is going to know what everyone's talking about. That's fine. But if you're trying to kind of present something from a more, just taking a step back, and rather than analysing it mechanically, rather than looking at like all of the individual pieces, you're looking at the game as a whole and kind of what it presents to players. I think that taking a step back and just trying to take a wider view and not get into these individual little mechanical bits can be valuable. I mean, on the other hand, like, if I'm writing a review, I will try to have like maybe 1.5 paragraphs of mechanical description tops, and I'll try to zoom in on clever little bits of a design. But I mean, some stuff that I read or some stuff that I watch on YouTube just literally runs through the rulebook.
Oh my goodness, yeah, I've had this discussion. I mean, I wrote a piece about it was a Kickstarter preview, and I thought, do you know what? I'm going to read 10 of these, and they're all going to be about the fact that it's going to be, here's the mechanics, this is how you play. So I turned it on its head and spent 800 words complaining about the fact the game was called Seals of Cthulhu but didn't have any seals in it. But, because the way I look at it, well, if somebody reads it and then they click on the Kickstarter link, is that kind of doing the same job as if somebody reads like a Kickstarter preview? But I know where you're coming from. I mean, do you think that's where we kind of need to be potentially moving to, is kind of moving away from, you might as well say, here's the rule book, read through that, and then I'll tell you what I think of it in the last sentence at the end.
Yeah, and I mean, don't get me wrong, there's definitely a place for rules run-throughs, but to me that's not really a review. And I think that if you want to draw a bigger audience to the hobby, to games criticism, then you need to kind of find what appeals to people, and what appeals to people about any kind of media, any kind of art, is, themes, characters, feelings, emotions, expression, and I think these are the things that I certainly prefer to focus on. It's what I prefer as a reader, it's what I prefer as a viewer, it's what I prefer to write about.
Yeah, so, I mean, going into... Because I always do this. I always talk to people for like 20 minutes about something completely random before we actually talk about the reason that they should have been on the show in the first place. I mean, is this you kind of moving into? Are you going to continue with the writing as it is? I mean, I'll take it that's the kind of the thing that puts kind of like food on the table and keeps a kind of a roof over the house. I mean, what kind of made you think and actually let's do something else. Let's kind of, I want to do something different. I want to put the book together, because when there was two things when I saw the book. I went, oh, it's a book about board games. And then I went, I don't think I've seen a book about board games, or I've not seen that many books about board games.
Yeah, well, the sort of idea behind it came when I was in the Waterstones, which is the big kind of chain bookstore in the UK in Glasgow. And they have a really big game section in there. They've got a board game section that's actually bigger than some game stores that I've been in. And, there were these people who were kind of picking up Carcassonne, Ticket to Ride, Pandemic, and just kind of looking at the back of the box and trying to figure out what these things were. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be cool if there was a book, in this bookshop, sitting right next to those games on the shelf, that just not only kind of explains what those games are, but kind of gives a bit more information on the hobby and some of the other stuff that's out there. I was thinking, wouldn't it be good to have a sort of guide for people to kind of get them into the hobby, to explain what these games are, what else is out there, and kind of take them through some of the options and introduce all of the cool stuff that's been coming out. And then I thought, well, maybe you could make it a little bit wider reaching. Maybe you could, not just have a guide for beginners, but something that kind of celebrates and explores and goes a little bit deeper into these games and the stories behind them. And as I said, I've been doing designer interviews for Tabletop Gaming magazine. So I thought, maybe we could include the designers and sort of really kind of put a bit of a spotlight on them and really celebrate their work and their creativity. And to me, it's kind of like if you've ever read a music magazine and found a really interesting interview with one of your favourite bands, or you've ever watched a DVD, one of your favourite DVDs with the director's commentary. It's not just interesting in and of itself, but to me, it sort of deepens my appreciation of the games. Because
I was thinking of the design works that you get from FromSoft for the Dark Souls games.
Right, okay.
Where they've got the actual interviews with the designers in the kind of the last bits, throughout the kind of the work, so you learn actually more about the design decisions and the impact that external influences kind of had on those design decisions as well, which is always kind of really, really, really interesting. Because one of the things because when I speak to, and I've spoken to, I was looking down the list of the content list of who you've got in the book, and I was like, oh, spoken to them. But it's amazing how the individual designer's kind of life and the way it's kind of panned out can affect the type of games that they go on to kind of create, or give their first insight, as well, along as the type of games that they played, the type of games they had access to, what they were playing when they were kids, from the very, very beginning. I remember speaking to like Brad Talton, who says, well, actually I was making card games when I was like 8 or 9 years old, and it's like why he's continued to kind of make stuff kind of go on, which is always kind of really, really cool. And as I say, when I was looking at your book, I don't think I've seen anything like that before.
Yeah, I mean, one of the great things about this hobby and this industry is that a lot of the really kind of high up people in it are quite accessible and quite willing to speak to people, you don't have to wade through kind of PRs and company representatives to get to them first. So yeah, being able to speak to Matt Leacock or Reiner Knizia or Rob Davio or Eric Lang or kind of any of these people who make some of the most acclaimed games in the hobby is great. And I mean, some of the stories that you do end up getting, like those influences. Like I was speaking to Don Eskridge, the guy who did The Resistance. Mm-hmm. and we got into this really interesting discussion about his background in improv theatre.
Oh, right, okay.
So the whole idea of the resistance and these kind of hidden, hidden agendas, hidden identities, came from the sort of interactions that had come up between characters in his kind of comedy improv groups, which I just thought was amazing. That's like, having played the Resistance and played games like it, it's not something that would ever have occurred to me that was the genesis of it, you know?
Yeah.
And it's little tidbits like that really just kind of just really appealed to me, that really just hooked me.
I mean, was there guys that was the ones that when you were speaking to them, kind of like surprised you, or kind of you were like, oh, okay, I didn't realise it was like this, or were you kind of aware of a lot of their background stories as it was?
Yeah, well, I mean, you can do a little bit of research beforehand, which is something I always try to do, just so I'm kind of coming in, like quite informed. I mean, one thing, Eric Lang, I was talking to him a little while ago now about some of his work on kind of licensed games like Star Wars or whatever, and I said to him, so you must like research in great detail. You must like just lock yourself in a room and watch all of the Star Wars films back to back. And he said, no, actually, that's not what I do. What I do is like surround myself with people who are big fans of a particular franchise, and I see what it is that they talk about, because that's the stuff that, the stuff that's made an impression on them is the stuff that I want to bring across in the game. That's what I want to resonate through the game design.
No, I totally understand that. I could see, I mean, that's what you want, because you could go down the line and say, well, actually, I really like this bit in the Return of the Jedi with the little teddy bear Ewok guys, and everybody's going, are you joking?
Where's Darth Vader? Yeah.
Exactly. Was it, I mean, how long did it take to put things together? I mean, because that's not, that's not like something over a weekend.
Yeah, the process is still ongoing. Believe me, we're going to be working on this right up to our print deadline, which is going to be around about October. Mm-hmm. And that's because we're looking specifically at the year in gaming, but we're counting the year as Essen last year to Essen this year.
Right.
Just because that's how the release schedule goes in the industry, really. And I mean, we've done some of the critiques and some of the interviews already, but we don't want to put an arbitrary line on it and say, right, that's it, because we know that between now and our publication date, there are going to be a lot more really good, really interesting games. So what that means is that there's going to be more stuff added, and we'll have to be very diplomatic about it, but it could be the case that there's going to be some really good stuff coming out that bumps off some of the stuff we've already got planned. So yeah, I mean, just the nature of the hobby, the nature of the industry is that pretty much until we go to print, we're going to be chopping and changing the lineup, which is a little bit stressful when you've got to get it to the printers for a given date,
No, I can totally understand, because I noticed, like, even in your Kickstarter, you've got kind of like, you've got a page, you've got a holder for like stuffed fables. Mm-hmm. Now, if I didn't have stuffed fables in there, I'd probably have Mice and Mystics in there instead. So I'm wondering, you've got stuffed fables, has Mice and Mystics been kind of put to one side? Because I believe it's Jerry it's Jerry Hawthorne.
It is, yes.
Both of them.
The same designer, and that piece was actually written by my colleague Matt Thrower, and he loved it. He thought that, I think he was a fan of Mice and Mystics previously, as far as I know, but he played it with his kids, and he found that to be just such an interesting experience, because that game is almost designed, it's specifically designed for adults to play with their kids, and to be this sort of, not just even a sort of GM figure, but a sort of storytelling guide to kind of discuss the kind of moral implications of some of the stuff that happens in the game, and I think that's what really appealed to him.
Is there people that, do you still have like a holy grail list of people that you would like to have kind of feature in the book, or have you got everybody that you kind of want?
The one guy I have never been able to pin down is Richard Garfield, and I'm guessing that's because he's just spoken to so many journalists about Magic over the years that he never wants to sit down for another interview again as long as he lives, And the thing is, like, I don't want to piss anyone off by saying this, but I was thinking perhaps Bunny Kingdom for the book, but having played it at UK Games Expo, I'm kind of reappraising that, because I didn't really enjoy it that much. But please don't tell Richard Garfield I said that, because that will probably scupper any opportunity I ever have of nailing that interview.
Just tweeting him just now. Just give me a second. Yeah, I've got him on DMs. You see,
Right. Okay.
he's my
Is that
cousin.
Oh, right.
No, he's my cousin's wife's brother. So he comes
Right.
round
Okay.
every Sunday for dinner. I'm only joking. I don't know. I heard really, really good things about Buddy Kingdom, but then I've not had a time to. I've been kind of deciding to strip back and kind of go through kind of stuff that I have played once or twice, and I kind of want to play some more. But no, I can edit that out of the podcast. It's fine. It's
I will stand by my opinions. I played Bunny Kingdom and I thought that it did some interesting things, but so it's basically a card drafting game, and you're drafting cards to claim territory on a board and things like that, but you're also drafting cards that give you new victory conditions, new point scoring conditions, and we just ended up with so many different ways to score points at the end of the game that we were literally sitting there trying to work out the scoring for as long as we just played the game. That might be because it was the third day of a convention and we were all just sleep deprived and starving and just ready to keel over unconscious, but that was our experience of the game.
Are you having to kind of like constantly be kind of playing games? I mean, is that the flip side of kind of getting stuff ready?
Yeah,
are
terrible.
you kind of sitting there with like a pile of games and saying
the sheer workloads? Yeah. No, I mean, in all seriousness, one of the things about doing this for a job is that you're taking something that is your hobby and you're making it a source of pressure. If you're suddenly applying kind of deadlines and, people have got expectations of you and things like that. You've got situations where, you've got the game that you really want to play, but it just sits for, a month or 6 weeks. Yeah. Taunting you while you play all the stuff that you've got to write about. Yeah. And I know that sounds like a completely invalid complaint to make because, ultimately I'm playing games, I'm doing something that I'm interested in. But, for me, games have been such a kind of safety valve and a stress reliever over the years. And sometimes when they do become a source of stress, a source of pressure, that can kind of have implications.
No, I totally see where you're coming from. I mean, I've reviewed video games myself. I've been down the situation where I've stayed up until goodness knows what time to try and get a game finished to play a deadline. I mean, I completely understand with same with board games as well, because board games, they're so subjective in that you can be in the situation where if you have had a bad day and you're really not into it, you're not clicking with it, you're sitting with the wrong people who aren't having the best day ever. It happened to me with Dinosaur Island when we first played Dinosaur Island when it kind of arrived, and everybody was sitting around the table, and it was obviously we almost lost a couple of people straight away because there was certain rules that we needed to go back and double check, and that always kind of put stuff in, but we weren't kind of in the mood to do it. But the next time I played it with the kids, and we rattled through it, and we had a really, really good kind of time. So that I can see that. What kind of games? I mean, what's on the kind of I'd really like to play list just now? Not ones that you want to buy, but ones that you've got sitting there that you say, "Well, I really want to crack open the cellophane and get punching and get playing."
I still haven't had a chance to try Rising Sun, and I really enjoyed Blood Rage, so I'm kind of keen to see how some of the ideas there are developed. Let me just look at my pile of shame. What have I got? Everything's all over the room as well because I'm doing photography, so I've got various components scattered everywhere.
Oh my goodness.
Well, I've got the Chameleon, which looks kind of intriguing, and another kind of hidden information game, Decrypto. Which I've read the rulebook for that. It looks interesting. It's you're going over multiple rounds trying to kind of guess code words on your opponent's side, and over each round you kind of gradually introduce or kind of decipher more information, and I love a lot of those kind of quite kind of sociable, quite brainy, quite kind of linguistically interesting games. And then, I mean, the other thing that I don't really get time for these days is kind of getting back to some RPGs. And I know there's like the new edition of Vampire the Masquerade coming out this year, which my inner kind of teeny goth really wants to give a shot and see what they've done with it. And I'm actually sitting just now with Tales from the Loop.
Oh yeah.
Which is a sort of weird kind of Spielbergian kind of RPG about kids in Sweden living near what's basically like the Large Hadron Collider, and it makes all these weird kind of interdimensional robots and kind of technologies and creatures and things appear in their small island community. And I'd just love to give that a shot because it's something so different from the kind of stereotypical dungeon crawler. So yeah, that's the kind of stuff that I would like to get around to playing, and hopefully one day when board games are their respected art form and the kind of highly lucrative field of journalism that they deserve to be, then I'll be able to take some time to do that.
I mean, at the moment, if you're taking time off work, you're actually using time to play board games that you want to play, as opposed to playing board games that you kind of have to play.
Pretty much, yeah. Which is just as well my wife's a gamer as well, really, because, I think it would be too much for 99% of spouses.
Yeah. Well, I mean, certainly, I know that situation. I mean, my wife doesn't play board games. Not without trying, but it's just one of these things that it's just something that's never kind of really kind of happened.
Well, well done for accepting that.
I there's a point where you kind of keep on just saying, well, what about this? What about that? What about this? And then you're trying to explain, if we're going back to worker placement, trying to explain what worker placement is, and it's kind of like, well, that sounds a bit rubbish. And it's like, yes, it does. Technically, it does. But let's play viticulture, and I'm pretty sure I'll kind of change your mind. But it's never kind of it's not going to go as far as this. So what we're saying is, if I am the caring man that I am, that if I get her the board game book for Christmas,
it's a tool of coercion. Yeah.
I was thinking more as an informative guide to help her gently introduce her into the hobby. I was thinking of play the game.
That episode of The Simpsons where it's Marge's birthday and she gets a bowling ball that says Homer on it.
Yes.
I think you might be doing something a little bit similar there, to be perfectly honest. But
yeah, it's like going out and buying everything in the Studio Ghibli collection and say, "But honey, you like anime? Do I?" You like Spirited Away? Did I? Did I fall asleep? Yes. But you like it anyway. But I mean, if they're listening along tonight and saying, "But I don't know why I'm listening along tonight because it's not like he's talked much about the book," what can they expect when they open the book? I do this all the time, Owen. I mean, this is
Yeah, no, I know your format. I know that it's free form. But yeah, so in terms of the actual plugging of the book, this is going to be about a 250 odd page hardback. It's going to have insightful reviews of about 100 of what we reckon are the best games of the year in different categories, and it's going to cover everything from kind of family games and kids games right through to kind of medium weight kind of Euros right through to your big kind of Twilight Imperium size kind of epic strategy challenges. We're also, as I was talking about, we're going to have these designer interviews. Our goal is to interview every designer that has a game featured in the book. And there's, we've already done some really interesting ones. One of my favorites so far has been with Jacob Jaskov, who's the creator of Fog of Love. Which really impressed me. And then finally, it's all tied together with some really nice studio photography of all the games, showing off the components and the artwork, because the sort of visual appeal of these games and the tactile appeal, to me, is one of the really great kind of draws. It's what kind of grabs people's attention in the first place, And I took a college course in photography before I kind of started this project, so it's great to sort of combine those interests.
So what's the door price? How'd you get in?
Yeah,
How much is it going to cost to get?
If you're one of the sensible, intelligent, attractive people who backs us on Kickstarter, then it's going to cost you £20.
Just other sensible, attractive people do exist. Terms and conditions available on request.
But if you back us on Kickstarter, it's going to be £20, and that gets you a copy of the book, it gets you a PDF, an EPUB, and it also gets your name in the acknowledgement section, which I think is pretty cool. And that's also £3 off the retail price, because if you get it in the shop, it's going to skin you 23.
What, I mean, okay, just as a quick aside, what are you doing in terms of distribution then? I mean, this isn't like, I mean, obviously this is a slightly different bag of cats to your kind of your board games, but are you still kind of like approaching, you mentioned Waterstones.
Yeah,
so
well, let me tell you, if you like kind of heavy, complex resource management Euro games, then you would love book distribution. We're currently, so we've got retail distribution to game stores through a large distributor who I don't know if I can actually mention them yet, but if I say a large UK distributor, then I'm sure about like 75% of your audience will probably realise who that is.
Okay.
The book retail side is a lot more difficult because the distributors want to see a physical printed copy before they'll take it. So that's something that's going to, we can certainly put the wheels in motion now, and we've been speaking to companies about that, but that's something that won't be confirmed until the actual product's ready to hit the shelves. Mm-hmm. And we've also been speaking to some distributors in the US and the gaming trade side of things. So we're very keen to have it available in American and North American game stores as well. And then finally, we're going to be on all the online platforms, so you'll be able to get it on Amazon and digitally on your Kindle, your iPad. So yeah, we're just trying to cover as many bases as possible. Okay.
Has that been a whole different kind of skill set? Because obviously you've done the writing, you've done the journalism, content creation and everything like that. Has this been a completely new kind of skill set that you've had to kind of learn in a relatively quick period of time as well?
Yeah, it has been. And I mean, one of the things that has been useful is having kind of people around me who have a bit of a background in that sort of thing. Like we've had advice from kind of people who have been kind of like book buyers for major bookstores and things like that. And I've just been kind of bothering people for, pointers and hints and people to, contacts of people to talk to. But it's been really interesting doing it. And the other thing, obviously I've written stuff for other publications, but this is the first time that I have really been in a kind of editorial position. Yeah. And I've really enjoyed working with Matt, Terry, and Richard, who are the co-contributors. It's great to work with some of my favourite games journalists, and just to kind of combine their skills and to kind of have their enthusiasm and their energy, and it's a bit of a dream come true, really.
Has it been also different kind of having to get on board in the promotion stuff? Because I'm guessing that apart from, I'm guessing that you kind of like Tabletop magazine deal with the kind of the tweets and the marketing for that, and obviously the Guardian has its own probably lovely section that deals with all that as well. Yeah. Has that also been something that you've kind of went, I better try and get the name out on this, otherwise it's not going to get made?
Yeah, and I mean it's you're quite right. Like one of the things that I enjoy about writing for other publications is that if you're trying to establish a podcast or a YouTube channel or something, then you've got to do all of this behind the scenes work to try and kind of build a bit of buzz around it and kind of be part of a community around it. Whereas I just get to kind of file my copy and say, thank you very much, I'll see you next month. Exactly. So this has been kind of picking up a new skill set, and I'm not the world's best on the whole kind of social media kind of thing. Yeah. I didn't even have a Facebook account before I started this project because I think Mark Zuckerberg's just a creepy, deeply creepy individual.
Humans drink water. Yeah.
Like the stories about do you remember he said he was only going to eat animals he'd killed himself? And everyone said, oh, that's great, he's being a kind of responsible omnivore, but at the back of my mind there was just this wee voice saying maybe he just enjoys killing animals.
There's maybe just that there's a wood out the back of the Facebook headquarters, and he's just leaping around like some kind of feral animal.
Yeah, like he's got the Rambo face paint on and the
with sharpened teeth, just going after squirrels. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, Mindy, where's your dog? Oh, let her run out the back. And no, You can't do that. Mark's on his attack mode. Just to
That's,
cover
that's
it
when
with
he
a
gets the
dog.
special. That's when he gets the special camouflage hoodie on.
Exactly. He's like, oh no, Mindy, your dog's just been tagged. But yeah, but I mean, is that kind of like being, oh my goodness, I need to kind of get out there on the Facebook page and get the tweets out there and kind of contact people and reach out to people and do kind of like the networking. I mean, was it easy? Was it easier to do that? Was it easier to do that because you kind of had the connections, or was it a case of I actually now need to be engaging with content creators myself when I have formerly or I'm currently a content creator?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely the latter, and I had some contacts with people, just from kind of meeting them at conventions and all that kind of thing, which is great. And I do enjoy kind of speaking to people who are enthusiastic about the hobby, and that side of things is great. It's just the more sort of formal social networking side of things. It's I'm one of these people who's always preferred having like a small group of real world friends rather than a kind of big group of kind of Facebook followers.
Yeah.
And it's it's taken a little bit of kind of overcoming some of my own ineptitude on that front, but I think I'm doing okay. But the thing is, like, so much of the stuff that's really effective isn't the kind of set piece kind of like Facebook ads or anything like that. Is kind of generating that word of mouth. It's somebody likes an idea and they tell their mate about it, and because they're enthusiastic about it, then their mate gets enthusiastic about it, and then they tell their cousin, and she tells their girlfriend or whatever, and that, I think, is where most of the backers and most of the interest in the book has come from.
Yeah. Well, as I say, we funded. I mean, this is gonna happen. There is gonna be there's gonna be a board game book that's gonna be kind of out there. Where do you guys exist on the internet webs? If they've listened along tonight, where can we find you?
Yeah, okay, so we are at boardgame-book.com, because someone registered boardgamebook.com years and years ago and hasn't actually used it. We are on Kickstarter if you go on there and search for the Board Game Book, or you can find us on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. If you just look up the Board Game Book on any of those platforms, you'll find us.
Excellent. And of course, what we'll do is we will make sure that we put all those links in the show notes so that we have notes to show. If you want to keep an eye on what we're up to, go to the Googles, search for We're Not Wizards. You'll find us on a plethora of places and platforms. Unlike Owen, I am shallow and self-centered, so I have about 4,000 people that follow me on Twitter that I have no idea who they are, which is always good. But you can also find us on places like Facebook. We are on YouTube. You can also find us on places like Instagram, which for some reason...
You're so much better than this at me.
And you can catch us on places like Spreaker and Stitcher and Acast and Podknife, and obviously Podbean itself. You can go to our website, which is we'renotwizards.com. You can go to our blog spot, which is we'renotwizards.blogspot.com. We've written a couple of bits. If you don't go and visit, as we keep saying, we're going to write some more. So go and see us so you can stop us.
It sounds like it'd be easier to list the places they can't find you.
We are everywhere. I mean, we're also on Apple Podcasts, and as we say, if you like what you've listened to, then jump over to Apple Podcasts and give us a subscription. If you like us even more than that, consider giving us a rating or a review. And as we say, if you are going to give us a rating or a review, don't give us a 10, because it makes us big-headed. But don't give us a 1, because I'm an ugly crier. Give us a 5, because it's in the middle, and it's average, and we are decidedly average. But the gentleman who's not been average tonight, who's been rather interesting and a pleasure to speak to, has been the one, the only, the wonderful, the fantastic Mr. Owen Duffy. So thank you very much for coming on, sir.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been great.
And there's only 2 more things to do. The first thing is to remember that we are many things, but we're not wizards. Are we wizards, Owen?
I don't know. No one's ever actually clarified that. Are you not a wizard?
I'm definitely not a wizard.
Right.
I'll take that as a no from me.
Okay.
And the second thing is to say goodbye. So it is a goodbye from Owen. Say goodbye, Owen.
I'll see you later. Thank you.
And it's a goodbye from me. Remember, stay safe, roll sixes, and check out the board game book, because Christmas isn't that far away, and it could be a good present for somebody who loves the hobby already. It could be a good present for somebody who's looking to get into the hobby. It could be just good to just have sitting on your coffee table, just to have a look, a read, and find out some more stuff about the hobby that you don't know anything about. But until the next time, goodbye.